Well, brilliant. It's great to be here. Thank you, worship team. It was just great to be able to worship. Who's missed worship over the last 18 months? I definitely have. It was just great just to worship God together in community. And guess what? You can listen to it on Spotify, but guess what? It's not the same, is it, if it's not in person with other people? And so it's great to be here. And I guess over the last 18 months, we've had a lot of opportunity to sort of experience silence, I guess, as well, haven't we, in our lives? And for some of us, it might have been the first time that we've experienced silence. And silence, I know, for some of us, can be something that we really struggle to cope with. And it can be a bit awkward, can't it? Let's be honest, especially in some of those situations, you've just said something in a group conversation and nobody's responded. Group chats, I love to put a little GIF on there, that I think is really funny based on what's gone on, and nobody responds. Just me then? Okay, so it happens, and you go through this stage of asking yourself, did I read it wrong? Have I offended somebody? Have I read the situation wrong? Or for some of us, silence can sometimes be something that we long for. It's something that we just want a moment of peace and quiet in our lives. Because we want to get away from it all. Just want a moment to think straight. And so today I want us to take a few moments to think about how we can spend some time with God in silence. And how we can learn to actually embrace times of silence in our lives. And how can we use that space to listen to God. You see, spending time in silence is not about going off and finding an acoustically dead room. I've got a friend who's a musician, and some of these guys have got their in-ear monitoring, and they get their ears molded to the shape so that it is a perfect fit. But in order to go through that process, you have to have like a liquid foam injected into your ears. And actually what happens is it makes you can't hear a thing. It makes you completely deaf. And one of the very common side effects is that when you have the first one done, you're like, okay, yes, I can't hear anything out of my left ear. And then all of a sudden, your right ear goes and it's done. And then somebody talks to you. And your brain can't cope with the fact that somebody is talking to you and you cannot hear a thing. It happened to my friend Gaz. And the next thing he knew was that there were people making a fuss over him. And he was lying on a table. And he's like, how did I lie on a table? Because he'd passed out. Because his body couldn't cope with the fact that he'd experienced true silence in that moment. So you see, I'm not talking about that type of silence, okay? But what I am talking about is finding time and space to be quiet, to listen to God. Lamentations 3, verse 25 to 26 says this, and it's probably on the screen. It says, "The Lord is good to those who depend on him and to those who search for him. So it is good to wait quietly for salvation from the Lord." Friends, we live in a world that encourages us to be noisy. It encourages us to be comfortable with noise. And some might say we've even become addicted to noise. Just think about it. Noise on the radio, what we're listening to, what we're watching on TV or on Netflix. What the noise that our friends are chattering around us. And trust me, we've got one of those friends who always talks, like always. You cannot shut them up. I've got one. He's here tonight. So, everybody's got a friend that just talks, right? Yeah, so. And then there's different things that are going on in our world that are noise. They're constantly being shot at us. Social media. Keep scrolling. It's just noise. And then there's our internet search history, isn't there? There's ads based on our internet search history. And I could go do a talk on internet search history, but that's a completely different subject. And I won't go there for tonight. But I will tell you a story about my internet search history to make my point to you guys. Our bathroom sink broke a few weeks ago. And so I did that thing of getting on the internet and looking to find a replacement. And guess what? There are lots of bathroom sinks out there. But I found the one that is exactly like the one that had broken. And so I thought, job done, ordered it. It's exactly the same. I'm not going to have to worry about replacing my whole entire bathroom suite so that it matches. Because I'm the kind of person who likes things matching. Okay, I don't know if there's any other matchers out there. I like things to match. So I'm not all this sort of, let's have an avocado bathtub with a brown chocolate sink with a peach toilet. You know, as I go here, all these colours. Oh, okay, I may be showing about age, but if you ask your mums and dads about what colour toilets their mums and dad had, or when they went to visit Granny, those were the colours that there would be in there. I remember my great grandmother had an avocado bathroom sink suite, and the whole thing was avocado. But you know, apparently it's hip to have matching colours back from those days. So the price of a vintage avocado toilet has gone through the roof from scrap merchants. So you know, if you're at your grandma's house and you fancy making a few quid, ask her if she wants to sell her toilet. There'll be some hipster in London who wants to buy it, trust me. Anyway, so I was on the internet, I bought it, I thought job done. And do you know what? For weeks on, all I got was, Rich, would you like to buy a new bathroom sink? Rich, would you like to buy a new bathroom sink? Rich, you could have a better bathroom sink. Now, I didn't know that there could be a better bathroom sink out there other than a sink. Last time I checked, a sink is good for filling up the water, you know, so I can dip my razor in it, you know, shave, dip it again, shave again. Underneath here is quite good. I recognise here isn't particularly shaven, so, you know, you know, I have to shave every morning underneath the chin. So, or, you know, just wash, and then guess what? The water drains away. It's a good place, you know, that's what a sink's for. But apparently there's all sorts of sinks that could enhance your life better. I wasn't interested. But my point is this, friends, there is so much noise aimed at us in life. And silence becomes a rare thing in our lives. And if we're not careful, we don't know how to cope with it. And we don't know how to use it to our benefit when it comes to learning, to listening to God. See, one of my favorite Bible stories is found in the book of Samuel, and it teaches us the importance of learning to listen to God. Now I'm going to give you the Rich Miles version of this story, okay? And it's found in 1 Samuel chapter 3, if you want to read it for yourself. But I'm going to give you the Rich Miles version, which is you won't find in any bookstores or online, okay? This is just live here. And it goes like this. Samuel, okay, he's our main guy in the story, okay? So he's a small boy. And he lives at the temple, and he lives with this guy called Eli. Now, Eli is the chief dude in the temple, okay? He makes sure everything happens, but he's really old. And when we read the Bible, it says that his eyesight isn't going. And it tells us that the setting of the story of this moment here is at night because the lamp is still burning. Anyway, Samuel's asleep, but then he hears this voice saying, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel gets up and he runs to Eli and he says, yes, Eli, I'm here. What can I do? And Eli looks at him and goes, I didn't call you. I didn't call you. Go back to bed. So Samuel goes back to bed. And then again, this voice calls out to him and says, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel gets up and he runs to Eli and he says, Eli, I'm here. What can I do to help? And Samuel says, Samuel, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. Samuel hears his voice being called again. Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel goes to Eli in that moment and goes, Eli, I'm here. What is it that I can do to help? And Eli goes, it isn't me, but I think somebody else is wanting to talk to you. I think God might be wanting to talk to you. So go back to bed, and if you hear the voice again calling your name, say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." And so Samuel goes back to bed, and he hears his voice being called again. And this time he answers, and he says, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." It was in that moment that Samuel learned how to listen to God's voice. In that moment, God said, "Hey, Samuel, I've got a message for you that I need you to give to Eli." And he does. And, it's not a particularly great message to hear. But God fulfills his word that he's given to Samuel, that he's passed on to Eli for Eli and his family. Samuel goes on to be one of the greatest prophets in the Bible. God speaks to him regularly throughout the rest of his life, right up until the day he dies. And he becomes God's mouthpiece to the people of Israel in that moment. Samuel learned from a young age how to listen to the voice of God. Listen to how to cut through the noise, to listen to when God was speaking to him. And so when big decisions were needed to be made, he knew he could rely on the voice of God to guide him because he had learned how to listen to it. Now, Samuel wasn't the only one who learned how to listen to the voice of God. Or more importantly, wasn't the only one who decided that silence was actually a pretty good thing in order to help us listen to the voice of God. Jesus did it too. He modeled it for us when he was here on earth. We read countless times, and I'm going to go through a load of you really quickly, how many times Jesus decided it would be good to go alone and spend time in silence, or go and spend time on his own. Matthew chapter 14, verse 23. After sending them home, this is everybody he'd been speaking to, he went up to the hills to pray by himself. He went to a lonely place in Mark chapter 1, verse 35. Before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. Or to the wilderness, or to the desert. Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness to pray, as in Luke chapter 5, verse 16. Jump another chapter to Luke 6. Jesus went up a mountain. One day soon afterward, Jesus went up a mountain to pray, and he prayed to God all night. And then back in Matthew chapter 14, verse 13, he even went to the seashore. Now, we are in Locking tonight. The sea is that way, correct? Yeah, so it's that way. Guess what? And in Matthew 14, it says this: as soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. Now, I'm not saying we all go and hire boats tonight, guys, and float on the sea. The RNLI would not like that. But what I'm saying is, you guys live near the sea. Guess what? You could just be like Jesus in that moment and walk along the beach and spend time on your own with God. But even in those final moments we read later in the Garden of Gethsemane, before Jesus goes to the cross to die for you and for me, he knows what he's going to go and do. What does he do? Instead of going and having a party thinking the end is coming, I'm going to go and talk to all my friends, I'm going to get all this stuff out of my system. No, he withdraws to be alone with God in the Garden of Gethsemane. Friends, I think that if Jesus thought being alone was a priority, I think it's a priority for us too, okay? To be alone with God. Not to be alone full stop, but to be alone with God. Spending time waiting in silence can be a difficult thing to do, but it will ultimately be worth it, friends. Why? Because it provides us with a space to be able to learn to listen to God, listen to the voice of God speaking into our own lives. Friends, we read in the Bible that he is always wanting to be in a relationship with us. How do you develop a relationship? It's got to be a two-way thing, right? And that's what prayer is about. Prayer is a two-way thing. It's not simply a moment where you're in a moment of crisis and you send up your emergency red flag to God with your shopping list of how he could fix all your problems. He wants to do those things, but he wants to do it in relationship with us. He wants us to be in relationship with him. And so, guess what? Yes, it might be us talking to him, but it's also about us listening to him. Just like Samuel said, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." We need to be listening too. There are many ways that we can listen. One of the simplest ways, one of the ways that I hear from God the most is simply by picking up the Bible. By picking up the Bible, when I want to spend time with God, looking at his word. God, what are you saying to me through your word? I really believe that this is the word of God that's designed for you and for me. Does anybody want a Bible? I've been looking to give this Bible to somebody. No strings attached. If you want a Bible to read it, go for it. Cool. There we go. And read it. I encourage you to read it, to listen to what God has to say to you through the Bible. Every day, there's a piece for you in that word. Because guess what? It's got the answers about how he feels towards us. It's all in there. It tells us of who he is and what he feels about us. Sometimes it can be helpful to try and take a walk on your own. And guess what? I'm somebody, the older I get, the more I love to spend time in the countryside, put my walking boots on. Hands up if lockdown's changed your life about going out in the countryside. Yeah? Do you remember in the first lockdown, it was like, Boris was like, you can only go out for an hour a day. Guess what? How precious did that hour feel? Friends, if we spent a moment with God every day, just as that moment, that hour of freedom, our relationship with him would feel far more precious. And so spending time with him. I love to go on a walk near the fields in my house where I live and spend time with God and just go for a walk with God. Or sometimes I'm just sitting at my desk in a moment when somebody's picked up the phone and rung me and said something to me, and you know what? It's really hard to hear what they've had to say because something's going on in their life. And it's really difficult. And I just have a moment where I'm just praying. And I just say, Lord, I just want you to help this person right now. But I just close my eyes, and in that moment, I just feel that he's there with me. Now, it's important to be honest with you and say it might feel like God isn't there in those moments when you're trying to listen to him, to pray with him. But guess what? Silence isn't absence, friends. Silence isn't absence. Do you know what? You can sit in a room with somebody and be really content that you're just in their presence with them. I'm an introvert, right? So I'm not a big extroverted character. And sometimes for me, it's just enough to be in people's presence. And it's the same with Jesus. Sometimes I'm just really content to be in his presence. And that's where we need to be content of just being with him and just being in silence. Pete Greig, founder of 24/7 Prayer, is a big advocate of that. God's silence isn't his absence. So friends, can I really say this today? Just because you don't feel God is speaking to you in that moment, can I say that you press in, read your Bible, press into the presence of him. Just be comfortable of being on your own in silence. Being silent before God is opting to enjoy being in his presence and being led by him.